when I think it was my first year in college. I think it was my first year in college. I was working for a small firm here in Lexington, and I shared an office with a guy who was about 30 years my senior and wore proudly on his sleeve the title of intellectual, and he was entering a competition was sponsored by AIA for a birdhouse, and the challenge was for the architects throughout the city to reapproach and re-envision the idea of what a birdhouse is. And it was for a fundraiser and the whole thing, and so basically it was for a lot of self-pedestalizing intellectuals to try to show off. And so he had prepared a sketch, and we would have conversations about it, and one of those conversations turned into one of those conversations that Gail will always say, "Why do you get yourself tied up in stuff like this?" But it was still valuable. And the conversation was that he had created this sketch. And I have to say the sketch was a beautiful sketch. He has a great hand to sketch. And he had re-envisioned the birdhouse out of stainless steel rod and kind of sailing type rigging. And it was this kind of beautiful object. And without really kind of pushing the obvious, do birds kind of naturally inhabit stainless steel forms? I let that one go. And our conversation turned to why stainless steel. And he argued that the idea was that stainless steel had this kind of permanent value because it doesn't rust, and it stays shiny, and the whole thing had this kind of permanent value. And so the conversation really kind of started to hit the road and become more of a debate when then the conversation turned to whether or not that value statement about stainless steel was inherent value or attributed value. And from his perspective, which is a man of the world, not a Judeo-Christian ethic in his life at all, he argued that there is no inherent value, that all value that any of us place is an attributed value. What each man considers value is value in his mind, and then we really shouldn't be trying to foist value on others. And so his argument was that this had an inherent enduring value, but he was assigning. So I was arguing, no, it may not be stainless steel, but there are things that have inherent value, and that they are valuable whether or not we ascribe value to them or not, whether we believe it or not, whether we sense it or not, whether it's valuable to us or not. There are things in the world or ideas in the world that have inherent value. And so this was, a guy in his early 20s and a guy in his middle 50s debating this thing out, and I knew my place. I'm the young punk that doesn't know any better. So I had the gall to challenge him on this. Well, the only reason I bring that up this morning is because I think that conversation had a lot to do with pushing me to think more thoroughly through, well, if things do have inherent value, then where does that inherency come from? What is the non-negotiable inherent stance of value or quality? Where does that come from? And for me, of course, for us as Judeo-Christian people of Judeo-Christian ethic, we know where that inherent value comes from. But it helps me understand why Mr. Worldly Man doesn't, because he doesn't include that idea that there is a creator God. And if you're trying to center in on this, just human life has inherent value. We of course attribute maybe more value here than there, and maybe a little more value here than there, but that's us misapplying the inherent value that God places on our lives. So I'm only offering that this morning is to say, in the context of Ecclesiastes, and certainly in the context of your human life, or your Christian life, that can be one of those litmus tests you use, because it's certainly been a litmus test for me. I'm a remedial student, so it takes me a long time to kind of hear what actually came out of my mouth a long time ago, and to find out why it was so important. But that became a litmus test for me many years later on what's worth chasing, what's not worth chasing, What's worthy of my attention? What's not worthy of my focus? What is enduring? What's not enduring? What's transient? What's permanent? And I use that kind of conversation about inherent and attributed value in order to kind of bring balance in my life to say, big picture. Maybe that's really, really wonderful, exciting, attractive, alluring, but is it really of enduring value? And it helps me thin the herd of distraction to really keep my focus on what's most important. And so I offer that in the context here now of Ecclesiastes, because I think that's what Solomon's done to a great degree here, is that he's asking the big questions about, is there anything that has real meaning, real value? And if it says, where does it come from? And it's not that it's not that Solomon doesn't know. He's doing the work of not just hearing it from his father and passing it on to his son, but experientially learning this. And that's where we need to be also, experientially learning these things, not just subscribing to them simply because somebody else said it. That would fall into the inherency. We want the more permanent, that would fall into the attributed. We want the more permanent of inherency in our lives. So with that as a kind of of an opening thought, maybe to kind of get our juices flowing, I have to back up for a minute because I'm learning this as I go through again. I never read scripture and think, well, I'm just going through that motion because I've already learned whatever that has to say. So I'm going through Ecclesiastes, relearning and redigging into Ecclesiastes at the same time. And I hit a point here this week where I said, man, I wish I'd understood that 2 weeks ago when we started Ecclesiastes. So I'm going to back up, if you'll let me, to chapter 1, verse 1 for just a few minutes to put in place something that I would have liked to have put in place a few weeks ago. And that is the word meaningless. I'm not a linguist, I'm not a Hebrew scholar, but I dig words, and so I dig into words. And so I get, in my studies this week, uncovered a little bit more about what Solomon is communicating with the word meaningless. And this is a place where my discipline of Joe Jew helps a lot. What did they hear? What were they saying at their time? I need to hear it through their ears. And what they heard when Solomon spoke, when God spoke through Solomon, when Solomon speaks, when he says, I don't want to, the words of the teacher, the son of David, king of Jerusalem, meaningless, meaningless, says the teacher, utterly meaningless, everything is meaningless. For many, that's a big downer. And in many respects, they could take that position. What the Hebrew heard was not what we write in contemporary translations, which shows up for the most part in meaningless, vexation, and vanity. Those are the three words that we typically see there. What the Hebrew word is Habal, or Haval, H-E-V-E-L. That's the transliteration, or H-E-B-E-L, depending upon whether or not you're northern or southern. It's a joke. Okay, so, but it's spelled the same way, or spelled both those ways in the transliteration. And just so we get the idea of transliteration, Hebrew's written in a Hebrew vocabulary. That vocabulary has an enunciation. That enunciation creates the word. I don't speak Hebrew, so I can't give you the correct enunciation of the word Haval. But Haval then gets transliterated, which means the enunciation gets then respelled in the alphabet that we have and the enunciation that we have, and then gets respoken in Haval, or H-E-V-E-L, which comes from, however you really pronounce that word in Hebrew, and the Hebrew spelling. So that's what's called transliteration, not translation, but transliteration. Okay, and so that's how we get all the way from taking that Hebrew word to the word meaningless, vanity, or vexation. But for the Hebrew, now put your Joe Jew ears on for a minute. The Hebrew, when he heard Solomon speak this, and when Solomon's speaking this, the word Haval, the word that he used, is the word vapor. It's vapor. So if we read what Solomon is actually saying, allowing Solomon to use his word, not our transliterated word that then becomes translated, we hear the words of the teacher, the son of David, king of Jerusalem, vapor, says the teacher, utterly vaporous. Everything is vaporous. That's what Solomon is saying. And we have translated it to meaningless, vexation, and vanity. Now, I'm not going to say that we've done a horrible disservice by translating it that way. But I'm going to ask you to consider, have we pre-charged or preloaded or prejudiced what we might hear Solomon say afterward if we attribute a value statement to the word that Solomon used by transliterating and then translating from vaporous to meaningless? Do you follow what I'm saying? Have we? Yes.
Because vapor doesn't mean meaningless. I mean, to me, vapor just is fast and over fast. I mean, it still has meaning. It's just over fast.
But could you say it's vaporous? It just doesn't mean anything?
No, I think you shouldn't say it that way.
No, I don't. Not that you shouldn't. But could you? Could you say?
I guess you could. I don't think that's.
Yeah, it's just wind. It's vapor. It doesn't. Maybe you make it as a personal statement. It doesn't mean anything to me. It's vapor. The opposite of love is not hate. The opposite of love is apathy. It's that I simply don't care. If I hate somebody, I still care about them. I want them to change to be something that I don't hate. You know, the opposite of hate is love is not hate. It is apathy. It is vaporous. It doesn't mean anything to me. So, as a personal statement, I could, and maybe you don't necessarily, but I could. But do you see how that you can pre-charge? Because I think that's the point you're making is that yeah, you can pre-charge the word with a value statement or a structure of what you would think about what you would say after that by doing this. And so for me personally, and what I'm offering to you this morning is to consider for a moment that we just take what Solomon said and what that means to the young man that he's talking to, the younger generation, that I've been there and done that, and I can tell you it's like vapor. Now, if you take that word vapor and you begin to apply it, and again, in the Hebrew context, what he's talking about is the visible but ingraspable. I know it's there, but I can't get it. I can't grasp it. I can't contain it. Now, if we allow that idea, which is from the Hebrew origin of what Solomon is saying here, and then take the word meaningless to the side for a moment, and honestly, is anybody reading from a King James in here? You are. Does King James use the word vexation?
On verse 2, vanity. Mine says vanity.
Vanity. Does anybody have a translation that uses the word vexation? Vexation is the other common one. Of the three words there, vexation seems to be a little closer to knowing that it's there, but not. It frustrates me that I can't get a hold of it. Yeah. You get a little closer, I think, to what Solomon is really struggling with if he's looking out into the world and he sees all of these vast contradictions under the sun and struggles with how to make sense of this, and looks out and says, under the sun, it's all vaporous. I can't get there from where I'm at. You can't grab that, you can't package it, you can't contain it, you can't understand it. And so you look like you're right on the edge of contributing here. Did you have something that's just rolling off your tongue? Skip? No? Okay. You just look like you were about to blow there. And I always want to if you've got something to put on the table, I always want to give you the room to put it on the table here. Brad? Yeah?
I do.
Yeah.
So is he struggling with how to get a grasp on it? Or is he struggling with why everyone under the sun puts so much value in all of these things?
I think you're closer to the second. How is it that under the sun, do we not struggle to make sense of all of these contradictions that swirl around us? Now, again, Solomon, it's not that Solomon doesn't know that there's a God above the sun, an authority above the sun, an absolute above. It's not that he doesn't know that. He's doing the hard work of arriving at that unalterable conviction himself. Not that it's just been handed to you as the privileged son of a king, but doing the hard work. And he's calling us to do that hard work too. So I think you're a little closer in your latter observation that why is it if every time under the sun we hit a dead end, are we not looking for something other than what's under the sun? Why does the unredeemed, to put it in our terms, why does the unredeemed man keep struggling against this vapor to try to grasp the gospel? Even though he can see that it's there, he can't get it. Why are we not asking the question, is there something more? Have I just narrowed my search for purpose, meaning, reality too narrow? What happens if I broaden it up? I think that's where Solomon is pushing. So I think it's the latter of your observation. So with that, I want to step into where we're headed today, which is in chapter. And this is a little difficult because there's a huge amount of material here, and we're only going to look at one piece in chapter 4 and one piece in chapter 5. And I'm going to stay in that model, even though I would love to kind of dig into a whole lot more, but we would just get mired in an awful lot there. So we're going to just stay focused here in one piece of chapter 4 and one piece of chapter 5. As a prep to step in, I hate that there's not. I don't hate this. I mean, I appreciate it. I hope you appreciate it as well. There are kind of preamble ways to step into thinking about what Solomon is saying here, and so I want to hope to help in that process. This is a 1986 film, but have you seen the film The Mission? Okay, Gail has. Gail has because I made her watch it one time. It's no wonder you didn't see it. It was a $24 million film that only grossed $17 million in the entire life of its existence from 1987. And so it wasn't necessarily one of your big blockbusters, but it was an incredible film. I highly recommend you see the film, The Mission, and listen to it also, because Ennio Morricone scored the soundtrack for it. And if you will hear a theme that you know really well. It's called Gabriel's Oboe. And you know this piece? You know
Gabriel's Oboe, yeah.
Yeah, you know that piece of music. Yeah, a beautiful piece of music. That is the theme piece of music for it. Morricone was just hit a masterstroke on it. Anyhow, just really quickly, the storyline is in the middle 1500s. The Spanish and the Portuguese have gone to South America, specifically I think Paraguay, I think is where it's at, and they're harvesting in a system of human trafficking Paraguayanese Indians for Spain and Portugal, and also to sell as far as their shipping lanes will allow. I didn't know this until more recently, but in that time, Spain was the most wealthy and the most prosperous nation on the planet Earth. England was still a pretty small potato at this time when their rise was a little bit later. But Spain was like the bee's knees at this time. And so they and Portugal are now harvesting native Indians out of Paraguay and South America. At the same time, the Vatican is exercising its commitment to spreading the gospel by planting mission churches in South America. And in this particular region where the Spanish and the Portuguese are harvesting, there is a Catholic mission church there, and a cardinal has been assigned to South America. And so there's warlord tactics between these two, Spain and Portugal, for who gets kind of territorial harvesting area. And the church is there trying to bring the gospel. So there's this huge conflict between human trafficking and the mission of the church, which is a huge conflict, and then this kind of warlord tactic. So the cardinal is there to try to dispel the differentiation between the Portuguese and the Spanish, of which he's concerned because these are two highly Catholic nations that make huge ties to the Vatican in Rome, and he wants to stop the human trafficking, but he wants to do it in a way that doesn't upset the ability of these two nations to give to the Vatican. And so he's there. There's this young priest, a Jesuit priest, who is the priest of this mission church there, played by Jeremy Irons, wonderfully. It's worth seeing just to see Jeremy Irons play this role. And so that's the kind of the setup. Ultimately, we get through the whole thing, lots and lots of really fantastic, almost Bunyan-like events in it that are fantastic about the growth in faith. But we get to the end, and the only solution that emerges in this huge problem, which I'm not going to go into, is that there is a bloodbath at the church. The church becomes a haven for the Indians, for which the Portuguese and the Spanish cannot attack, and they did anyhow, and everybody dies. So at the end of the film, which is why I'm bringing this up, at the end of the film, the commander of the Portuguese slave trading system and the commander of the Spanish slave trading system and the cardinal are in a room, and they're debating how it is that we got to this point. How did we arrive at a point where the church can be a safe haven, and yet there's a slaughter for power over human trafficking right there at the church? And by the way, you burnt my building down. And so the three of them are trying to resolve this. And the Portuguese commander says, all three of us did what we had to do. The world is thus. And the cardinal, standing in the room, the other two are seated, goes over to the window, and he looks out into just the jungles of South America, and he says, no, thus we have made the world. And then he stops and he says, no, thus I have made it. He takes personal responsibility for what happened. But he takes personal responsibility after he recognizes that if thus is the world, thus is the way we've made it. And so I'm opening with that this morning in terms of looking at this first section of chapter 4, because it's common in the world to say, why does God look out upon all the evil of the world and not do anything about it? In fact, the unredeemed will use that as one of their primary reasons for not even considering Christianity. If your God is always, yes, he is, then why is there so much evil in the world? Surely you've heard this before. You've heard this before? Yeah, you've been in conversations with people and said, yeah, I'm just not buying your God thing, because why, if he was all that, then why does he allow this evil in the world? Well, as the cardinal illuminates extremely well in the narrative of the mission, why are we blaming God for our evil? Why is it the evil amongst men all of a sudden God's fault just because we're able to observe it? When it is our evil, and our evil collectively, but the cardinal doesn't allow us to say everybody's business is nobody's business. The cardinal pushes me to say, no, if it's a reflection of the world, then it's a reflection of us. And it's a reflection of us. I am one of us. It's the evil in my heart that causes the evil of the world. And the evil of the world is what we all lament. And why are we not asking ourselves, why is this if thus is the world, then why is it not thus that I have made it? Do you see what he pushes us to? So let's look at how Solomon approaches very, 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 at the core, very much the same thing. Again, I looked and saw the oppression that was taking place under the sun. I saw the tears of the oppressed, and they have no comforter. Power was on the side of their oppressors, and they have no comforter. And I declared that the dead who had already died are happier than the living who are still alive. But better than both is he who has not yet been, who has not seen the evil that is done under the sun. Now, even though we're going to go a little further, I want to stop there. Yeah, in one sense, you could say, wow, Solomon's really kind of got us back down in that pit there again. He's saying that all y'all is better off that you were never born than to have lived and lived in this cesspool of an existence where the power is on the side of the evil always. Now, that's not what Solomon is saying. Solomon is painting a picture of what it looks like under the sun, apart from the redemptive hand of God, not on evil itself, but on us and the evil that we are willing to commit. Because if you read Solomon closely here, what Solomon is talking about is the oppressor. He's talking about the person, the accountability of the individual person who will plot evil in his own heart and then more so than execute that evil against someone else. Now, to put it in terms that maybe are a little sharper for us, if you were made in the likeness and image of God, then so is Rob. And if we're all made in the likeness and image of God, then we all bear that maker's mark upon ourselves. And how could I so dishonor my maker by devaluing someone else who also bears the mark of the same God who made me? This is the inherent value of human life that exists in us simply because we are made in his likeness and image. That is the anchorage of the value of human life. Whether we believe it or not, whether we like it or not, and I tell you, every one of us, at one time or another, maybe even sometime during the course of this morning, before we even got in this room, have expressed some measure of devaluation of someone else's life. In one way or another, we have. Now, I'm not sure any of us are involved in human trafficking. That's more of an extreme of the value that one man would place upon another man's life. Currency. That's it. You're no more than currency to me. Right? And quite frankly, it's the net currency after spoil, because if, as a slave trader, if I harvest 100 slaves here, I already know that I'm going to get about 60% or 60% loss by the time I get them from here to Spain, and then of the 60% that remain, which I've discarded the other 40%, or 40% that remains, I've discarded the other 60% into the depths of the ocean, then I've still got to make sure that they're healthy and marketable, and these should be the strongest still, but I still have to find the right market to get these sold in order to be worth my weight in salt. So you can see how vulgar this idea of attributing nothing more than the currency value on a human life, when God looks down and says, I made him in my likeness and image. And those that you discarded into the depths of the sea along the way because they were your spoil. Yeah. So when Solomon approaches this here right now, he was saying that I looked out upon the world and the ways and means of the world, and in one sense, the world is thus. But Solomon calls us to accountability here and said, no, thus is the way we've made it. That oppressor cultivated within his own heart the evil that he expresses. I saw the oppressed. His first focus is on the disenfranchised, the broken, the hurting. There's a compassionate observation that Solomon's making about, I look out and I see people being wasted. And who's doing the wasting? Other people. Why is that? They have no comforter. And power is on the side of the oppressor. What he's observing is something extraordinarily vulgar. And this is all under the sun. And I'm grasping about at the vapor. Why is this? Now, he's not applying made in the likeness and image of God here. He's withholding that to say, under the sun, can you reason me this one, Batman? Riddle me this, Batman. That's the word. Can you riddle this one out for me? Can you reason this one out for me? Can you give me an answer here? Because you're just chasing the wind. And now Solomon pushes us a little bit further when he goes to verse 4. I saw that all the labor and all the achievement spring from a man's envy of his neighbor. This too is meaningless, a chasing after the wind. Fool who holds in his hands and ruins himself. Better one handful of tranquility than 2 handfuls with toil and chasing after the wind. Solomon, he helps us here a little bit. You want to know why under the sun that you will show such a high regard for yourself and such a comparatively low regard for others on a sliding scale? It's covetousness. That's what's burning in your soul, is covetousness. It's envy, it's greed, it's strife. It's to make someone else's yours. And it doesn't make any difference if it's someone else's person or someone else's wealth or someone else's position or something other than your lot in life. When you want to take that for your own, that becomes covetousness and is at the core of what's seething within you that wells up in the form of one man's evil against another. And after a while, you don't necessarily even see it in yourself, which is what Solomon is doing, is pushing us to look in the mirror really, really long and really hard. Be very careful. What Solomon is telling me here is be very careful when you look in that mirror, because if you're honest, you're not going to like what you see. Doesn't stop there, but you're not going to like what you see. And so, without saying it here directly, he raises it back. It is a vapor, a chasing after the wind. So he's forcing us to say, well, then what? And the well, then what is what is above the sun. If you're looking for an answer to this, you need to look above the sun. Now, for you and I, we're post-cross. We not only know, but we live in the conviction of above the sun. And that horizon between below the sun and above the sun is the cross of Christ. And we are born again into a life redeemed with eyes that see and ears that hear. And yet we still struggle with the very same thing that Solomon is talking about. It is at the core nature of our existence. And it is the discipline of our faith that arms us against this. So as Solomon brings us kind of under this microscope and in front of this mirror, go with Solomon. Allow what Solomon is saying to take some root. Allow what this man who was wiser than anybody else that ever hit the planet, allow what he's saying to guide you and your thoughts. Do the hard work. Don't be so quick to sweep it under the rug. The little discontent that I may have with my neighbor here, or the joke that I may tell about that totally idiotic driver that just cut me off in traffic, or any of the other things that infringe upon my soap opera cloud perfect life that bother me when someone else has infringed upon this perfect existence that I have. Gail will quip from time to time to say, this world wouldn't be so bad if it wasn't for all the people. and I understand what she's saying when she says that, so don't extrapolate that into some evil in Gail's heart, because she's pointing out something that Solomon is pointing out, and that is that, everything would be perfect if it was just the kingdom of Brad, and everybody was just like Brad. I mean, in the words of Henry Higgins from My Fair Lady, why can't Eliza be more like, well, me? That would make it okay. If everybody was like me, then nobody'd be stepping on my toes. Nobody'd be infecting my perfect little life. And the reality is that no, they're the people out there. And that though they commit evil, which we may say, God, why don't you stop them? Now, we're gonna bring this part to a close here, and we're gonna move on to a totally unrelated piece that Solomon's going to observe in chapter 5 here. To say it. What would it mean if you found yourself saying, why doesn't God get rid of all the evil? Why doesn't God deal with the evil? Why doesn't God purge this world? Would any of us be here witness to what the outcome would be if God did that? To say, God, would you please just get rid of the evil? I'd be the first one gone. And you'd be quickly there after me. There would be no. But God's method for dealing with the evil in the world is redemption. I desire a broken and contrite heart, not sacrifice. I would that all men be saved. I'm borrowing from both the New Testament and the Old Testament, both here. God's method for dealing with evil is a redeemed heart, redemption. It is not blanketly purging. To blanketly purge would mean all of us are gone, and would have been gone a long time ago. Do you see? Yes, sir. David.
I think it'd be easier for, at least for me to understand it, we take the word evil and make it sinful. We all understand it, yes, we are sinful, but a lot of us would think, I'm not an evil person. Yeah, I commit sin every day.
Uh-huh.
And for me, it's easier if I can change evil to sinful, and then, we're all gone.
Yeah, then we're all gone. Yeah. Because sin is just, the act of sin is an expression of the evil in my heart. I don't want to think of myself as evil either. I'm willing to allow the sharp blade of the word evil to cut for me. But you're right. How is that evil expressed? Well, it's in my sin. I am a sinful man. I am a fallen man. In Paul's words, I find this contrast within me. I'm paraphrasing now. I know right, and I desire to do right, but I end up doing wrong. I end up choosing wrong. Who will redeem me from this body of death? I thank God that there is Christ Jesus. He thanks God for redemption. He recognizes redemption. He recognizes that he knows what is right, but he still chooses wrong, and he places the highest value on the redemptive value of Christ in his life. I don't think any of us want to think of ourselves as evil, but I don't think any of us can honestly say, I'm not sinful. So I appreciate the perspective that you offer there, yeah. So, in the words of Monty Python, and now for something completely different. Let's go to chapter 5, 1 through 7. We are going to change gears here. I'd rather not kind of change gears, but Solomon changed gears on us, so we're going to. Let's read it. Solomon 5, 1 through 7. Guard your steps when you go to the house of the Lord. Go near and listen rather than offer sacrifice of fools who do not know they do wrong. Do not be quick with your mouth. Don't be hasty with your heart to utter anything before God. God is in heaven and you are on earth, so let your words be few. As a dream comes where there are many cares, so the speech of a fool there are with many words. Now when you make a vow to God, don't delay in fulfilling it. He has no pleasure in fools. Fulfill your vow. It is better not to vow than to make a vow and not fulfill it. Do not let your mouth lead you into sin, and do not protest to the temple messenger, my vow was a mistake. Why would God be angry at what you say and destroy the work of your hands? Much dreaming and many words are meaningless, vaporous. Therefore, stand in awe of God. Now, it's really easy for me to jump to that last sentence and just kind of ring in the new year with that every year. Therefore, stand in awe of God. I would suggest to you that the holy awe of God is probably one of the most thinly expressed conditions, even within the sanctuaries of our own churches. That holy awe, that holy respect, reverence, that unconditional consent to the lordship of God in our lives is a discipline for us. And it is, and honestly, and I'm going to confess, I may be alone in here, but that's a hard one for me. To find myself in, to discipline myself to remain with a laser focus on a holy awe of God without in some way re-injecting what God has been purging from me, out of me, in the transformation of me. So let's go back up to the beginning. Guard your steps when you go to the house of God. Listen more, talk less. There was a time, several years ago when my sons were teenagers and there seemed to be an argumentative spirit in the house. You all had teenagers, you probably went through something really similar. One time or another, there was an argumentative spirit in the house. And I was having a hard time kind of finding some way to ring to corral the cats here. And I pulled up behind a car, and I read this bumper sticker on the back, and it says, "Bark less, wag more." And I thought, that's it. So one of us has to bark less and wag more. One of us has to move beyond this kind of argumentative presence. And so for one of the very few times that Gail and I called a family meeting, we We assembled in the office at home, and we sat down, and we recognized the problem, and then between the four of us, we did our best to make a commitment, a vow, to use Solomon's words here, that we were going to default to the position of bark less, wag more. We were going to offer each other a greater measure of grace than maybe we were. And that was beneficial to us. It was a stupid, silly little bumper sticker, and I'm not telling you that Balaam's donkey was tagged to the back of this person's car, but it seemed to help us at a time when I didn't really have a good answer on how to kind of get us out of this rut that we were in. When Solomon says, guard your steps when you come to the house of God, this is one of the things that we focused on yesterday in the Kingdom Man Rising study. When you present yourself before the Lord, which is what Solomon's talking about, guard your steps when you go to the house of God. He's saying that when you step into the present, when you present yourself before God, you say, this is not Saturday night at the bowling alleys, no intent if it's intended. This is something.
I don't go on Saturday night.
Yeah, okay. Yeah. Bad crowd Saturday night at the bowling alley. This is not run of the mill every day. You're removing yourself from the world and willfully presenting yourself before the Lord your God, your Maker. To, in the end, stand in awe, in a holy awe of your Maker. So when you do that, be very guarded. He'll say, guard your steps. These first kind of 2 verses here are preparation. The rest of this section, from 3 through 7, is presentation. And I don't mean that to sound hermeneutical. I just mean to say that when Solomon walks us through here, he gives us preparation for presentation. And here, the preparation is, when you go, be very aware of the discipline and the preparation of your heart before you go. And then he'll go on to be very clear why. Then don't offer the sacrifices of fools who know they do wrong. Don't be quick with your mouth. Don't be hasty in your heart. What he's saying is that he says, if you go in pretense, don't think for a second that an omniscient God doesn't see right through your my thinly veiled pretense. To go and make some weak-willed, weak-voiced vow before the Lord, because I know that is the ecclesiastically responsible thing to do, but have no focused intent on keeping that vow. Don't think that God doesn't know that. Be very guarded in how you prepare yourself when you step before the Lord. There's no place to hide. There's no covering over your conceit. I'm not going to suggest that any of us are perfect at this. I think Solomon's telling us, be forewarned and know this about yourself before you go. That you're going to be willing to carry some of that pollution of Todd into that sanctuary and discipline yourself to purge, to present to God what He gave you, the perfection of His breath, His Spirit in you, the down payment of the glory that is to come that He put in you when He created you in your mother's womb. That's what you want to give back to Him when you go before the Lord. Everything that is not that is of attributed value that I put on me. And what I want to present before the Lord is that which has inherent value, what He places value on. So when you go, do that. So then he gets more pragmatic as he starts in 4. When you make a vow to God, do not delay in fulfilling it. He has no pleasure in fools who fulfill your vows. Better not make the vow than not to fulfill it. Don't waste God's time or yours. I mean, you do it at your own peril. But don't waste anybody's time. If you have no intention of repentance, then don't feign a repentant heart. It's better for you to say nothing than to feign repentance. And again, to just to graft a little bit from our Kingdom Man study yesterday, repentance is metanoia. That the Greek word metanoia, you break it down, meta meaning change, noyos meaning mind, and you put them together conjunctively in the Greek, which is what the New Testament mostly was written in, Greek and Aramaic. You get what the Greek hears, and the word metanoia, conjuncting the word change and mind together, they translate to beyond thought. The change of mind is beyond thought. And what they're saying in that is that it's not just a change of mind, it's a change of way. It is that what you believe needs to inform what you do. And so when it works all the way out into the word of repentance today, back to metanoia, back to change of mind, meaning change of way. The way that you did walk one time was the way of the world. In Antioch, we were known as followers of the way. Before in Antioch, they called us Christians or little Christs. But we were always known as followers of the way. And you're a follower of the way of Christ because you used to be the follower of the way of the world. So when you get all the way through this to metanoia or repentance, what we're saying is that we have changed our way of life, which comes from having changed the way we think. When he gives us, when Solomon leads us from preparation to presentation, he's saying when you come to present yourself, you're going to present yourself as one who has not just changed his mind, but has changed his way. Don't be a fool and make some vow that you have no intent to keep. That's just yak. It's better not to make any vows than to thinly veil in some manufactured piety a vow that you don't intend to keep. We'll do it real quick, but in Disney's film Beauty and the Beast is trying to figure out how it is to impress Belle, and Cogswell says, oh, the usual flowers, chocolates, promises you don't intend to keep. He makes a joke out of it, but it is true that when you want something, you'll make promises you don't intend to keep in order to persuade. Don't think for a second that an omniscient God allows this in us. And it's not that he is making up his mind on whether or not he's believing you. He's forming in you someone who won't try to approach him that way. Who will approach him with, and we're going to go to the very end here and now and put it to bed, one who will stand in a holy, healthy, all-consuming awe of him. And I hadn't planned on linking the two together this way, but it just occurs to me. If that's the nature of your life, a life lived in a holy, healthy awe of God, are you really going to be struggling all that much with this idea of looking at another person made in the likeness and image of God and devaluing them? With those new eyes to see and new ears to hear, we look around, and I can assure you that I have an endless list of differentiations between each of you and myself, and between each of you and each other. But the inherent value, the inherent nature of your existence is all the same. With you, with me, everybody on that side of the wall, which is the safe side, everybody on that side of the wall, which is the not so safe side, all bear that same mark, made in the likeness and image of God, in the process that God is engaged in of restoring us from our fallen estate into the glory of heaven, to lead us home. Solomon does the hard work of pushing his own buttons here, and he's forcing us to do the hard work of that as well. And I'll suggest to you that it is the holy awe of God that it is the first step in the right direction. We got to close. Dennis, can you close us in prayer this morning? Because I know we're running long here.